Hello and welcome back to Movie Husbands. Today we are reviewing Pig. Pig stars Nicolas Cage as Robin, a truffle forager whose truffle-finding pig goes missing. Also starring Alex Wolff and Adam Arkin, Pig is the debut film from writer-director Michael Sarnoski. Alright, so before we get started with today's review, one thing to note about this movie is that it really is best enjoyed not knowing anything about the plot. And so we are going to do a spoiler-free review at the beginning, but it's going to be very minor. And then we are going to go into a spoiler section after we give our grades, just so you're aware of what's coming and how this review is going to go. So, Jeffrey, what did you think about Pig?
Well, I can tell you one thing, it's not a revenge thriller, as one headline called it. This is a strangely beautiful and powerful piece of filmmaking, I think, and a surprising one. One that kept surprising me as it was evolving. As soon as I felt like I pinned down what kind of movie it was, it pivoted into something else while never really leaving its overall universe. It's pretty impressive and pretty astounding emotionally for me.
I think one of the amazing things about this movie is that it's such a simple movie that has so much complexity that's always just lurking under the surface. One of the things I love so much is that the movie doesn't really go into too much detail at explaining itself to you. There's a lot that you have to kind of infer from what you see and what you hear, and there are these little details that just kind of pass, but they really open up what's going on with this character.
Yeah, it very slowly reveals itself, because it's a film that's pretty mysterious, I think, for the first 45 minutes, in a very positive way. And as you said, these little bits of information are introduced, and they're introduced in very subtle ways. It's not like we've all kind of seen those indie films where there's some sort of like trauma, and this person is like concealing it for no reason for the entire runtime. That's not really what this movie is. Not to say that there's not some trauma involved that you find out about in some ways, but it's brought about so organically within the story. And there are these connections of thematic and character that come together, I think, so well throughout the film. There end up being all of these connections that you really wouldn't think would be there earlier in the film.
Yeah, and there's so many themes in this movie that have been played before, but I just love how this movie really kind of reconceptualizes how you can actually show those themes and kind of portray them to an audience. And I really enjoyed that about this film. And kind of on top of that, I mean, Nicolas Cage as an actor in this movie, it's such a subtle performance. All this stuff is just lurking under the surface with him. And you feel it in his character, and you feel it in his acting. He did a really phenomenal job in this movie.
This is a great performance by him. And he speaks so little in the film that when he does speak, you're really hanging on every word. I really like Alex Wolff's character. So he is kind of like the comedic sidekick for a little bit of this movie, but they humanize him in a really interesting way as this movie goes forward. And he is not just, the comedic sidekick to the guy who is, has all the trauma and he's so serious. Really interesting characterization, I think, for him, and very well thought out.
Very well thought out and very interesting, because that kind of hit me like a brick at the end. Is that you didn't expect, like, there's a specific scene right at the end of the movie with his character, and the way they end his character is just perfection. And after you see that moment, it kind of all just rushes into you, and you're just kind of like, wow, he went through something on this journey as well, and you don't really notice it until that last moment.
Yeah, you really get this sense of these two kind of people on their own authentic journeys that are just colliding with one another, which is really what we're all doing in our normal lives. But so many other films would treat all of the other characters just kind of as pieces that help inform our main character, which this movie doesn't do at all. This movie, certainly the other people help inform the main character in some ways, but they're completely their own characters with their own depth.
This movie is like really funny at times. And it's like these really small little bits of comedy. They land really well. They're really hysterical. I think on another note, I think this movie is just shot really well. It has this very kind of personal handheld most of the time. The camera's kind of shaky at times.
Yeah. What's interesting too is you notice there are times where the camera's remarkably still.
Yes.
And moments that are very emotionally affecting the camera is still. And there are moments that are more intense that the camera is shaky. And I noticed that happening and how well that kind of complements the emotions I'm supposed to be feeling. But it's secondary. I'm feeling the emotions first, and then I'm appreciating the craft, which I think for a debut filmmaker, this guy really knows what he's doing. I want to talk a little bit about how this movie juggles tones. You were talking about how funny it is, and it is very funny. There are scenes in this movie that seem to be lampooning fine dining culture. Which, you and I love fine dining, so, we feel like we're being lampooned. We understand the kind of the facade of it all, so we're very here for that humor. But at the same time, there are scenes later in the movie that clearly understand the kind of majestic quality that fine dining and food can have. So to have both of those at the same time, in the same film, in the same scenes, was quite a juggling act for this director and these actors.
Oh yeah, all that was just so seamless. The mixing of the emotion with the funny. And what I also love so much about it is that it was informed by the characters. Like, it was very character driven. I found this movie to be just so authentic and so real and down to earth. And that itself, authenticity, has a huge role in this movie. It's such a subdued film. It's very soft and intimate, but there's just these beautiful visuals of being in a forest at times. The way that the light is worked in this movie, all the colors are very muted in this film. It has this really kind of dark tone to it in a sense. There's a lot of shadows casting across people's faces. There's a lot of natural light being used in this film, or just what it seems like they create that so well, the light from a candle shining Nicolas Cage's face, or a lamp that's in a room shining on his face. So it's there's many scenes in which it seems like it's just the lighting is just very natural.
I don't know the budget of this movie, but I can't imagine it's very much. And to do so, how much it impresses me to do so much with so little. I always love that about filmmaking. So are you ready to go to grades?
Yeah, I give this movie an A. I was really emotionally impacted by this movie. I thought it was very well executed, and just brilliant directing here, brilliant acting here. Beautiful film, very emotional, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I give this an A as well. This is clearly the best movie of the year so far.
I agree, yeah.
Judas and the Black Messiah technically came out this year, which a lot of people are a big fan of, but for me, this is definitely the best movie of the year so far.
All right, now that we got that out of the way, time for spoilers. So I think the first thing I definitely want to talk about is Nick Cage's character, because you literally find out that he is this high-profile chef that everybody knew, and I just love how that reveal is slowly kind of brought to you throughout the film. It's one of my favorite aspects of the movie.
Yeah, I agree, and he has such a legendary status. It's almost like this John Wick thing. When John Wick walks into the hotel and they're like, John Wick. Every time he looks at somebody, they're like, but it worked really well. I don't know. It's something that could be so hokey if it was done incorrectly, but you just believe it every second of the way.
Yeah, there's this part of the movie where he goes kind of to this underground lair, which is this old building, and there's a bunch of restaurant workers there. And basically, they pay money to beat up their bosses. Mm-hmm. So, this dude comes in, and he writes his name on the board, and everybody's like... And then you just see the money piling down. Then Nick Cage just gets punched to death, near death. Even at that point, we weren't really completely in the loop yet.
No.
It was we didn't know to the extent of how important it was. That was kind of the moment we found out he was really important somehow. And to me, it was is he involved with the mob? What thing? Was he dealing drugs or something? What was he doing that warrants all this?
I know, out of the context, because we didn't know any of the context yet, when I saw that, I was like, that was a really confounding scene. And I was curious how they were going to fit that into the rest of the film. They did it quite well, but it's really funny. This movie really takes you on an interesting journey. That's why one of the first things I thought to describe it as was surprising. Because not only did this movie come out of nowhere and surprise me because I didn't know it existed 4 days ago, it surprised me every step of the way with its acts.
We can go back to that scene we were talking about earlier in the restaurant, because this is a really pretentious restaurant. This lady comes out with the dome with its smoked over, and she's talking about the food, and then she just lifts the dome, and the smoke kind of dissipates and reveals the dish. It's so performative in that moment. And it's interesting because we've been to some fancy restaurants, so we definitely related to it, but also the fancy restaurants we go to are very authentic.
Yeah. But there is a bullshit level to it of not specifically those restaurants, but I have been to fine dining restaurants where you can tell that they're faking it, or they're just doing it too hard, This isn't a film criticism, but the pig is very cute.
The pig is adorable.
It is a very cute pig.
Oh, the way it walks around and it just sniffs things.
It just walks around like just snorting.
And it just follows Nick Cage around, and it's the most adorable thing. They have an authentic connection and relationship.
It's a very cute pig.
All right, and that's it for our review of Pig. We hope you enjoyed this review, and we'll see you next time.